Well, happy April 6th, the official Mormon birthday of Jesus. Going to talk about Mormonism as a microcosm of global Masonic population manipulation. So, why doesn't anybody else talk about this? Why are some things not okay to talk about? Well, we all live under the global religion of mainstreamism. And whether you're Mormon or in the ex-Mormon community, you're probably living as a mainstreamer. Mainstream ex-Mormonism goes under the same cult that Mormonism does, and you thought you got out, but just went to another room. That's the way it is for most people, and I'm going to get into why, because this is why the other guys don't talk about what I talk about, because Mormonism truly is a microcosm of a much, much larger control mechanism. And let's focus on connecting some dots right now to show evidence to your mind that I'm talking about something that's actually real, because you've been programmed both in the church and out of the church to reject certain things as not being mainstream. Just like I saw Tucker Carlson on Fox News yesterday, who gladly compares CNN to basically a communist propaganda outlet working for communist countries, like Turkey, for instance, but then goes on to say he didn't spend 40-some years of his life to turn in. He said he spent the last 40-some years of his life not becoming a conspiracy nut. Because if you believe that there is global manipulation on a master scale, you're called a nut. Just like you're called a nut if you believe in eating health foods, and you're a health food nut, or you believe in homeopathy or naturopathy, or other forms of non-Western medicine healing, or homeschooling, home birth, anything that's not mainstream, follow the leader. The same thing you were programmed with in Mormonism, you'll find that the ex-Mormon community goes along with in the global agenda of what is called politically correct, which we get from the loosest trust, distributed through the corporate networks, which include the education system, the media, and the commercials you see, which all carry the same politically correct themes, no matter what the product is that they're advertising. As I've said before, this is because corporate governance dictates company policy in these corporations and in the ones that we call churches, where the Word of God is determined by what the Board of Directors gives as the Word of God. The Board of Directors usually parades around as divinely guided oracles, such as apostles, etc., in the LDS Church, or whatever they're called in the JW land, the devoted slave, or something really strange sounding. And of course, the boards of directors are controlled by the major shareholders in the corporate empire. And who are those people? Who are the people that speak and make the decisions for the financial entities that own the majority of stock in the churches, in the 501c3 corporations that serve the governments, to create patriotism and loyalty to the leaders, as religion has done for centuries and thousands of years. So let's take a quick look at some photographs. Let's link together Freemasonry with leadership positions all over the world. Let's link it with religious leaders, including LDS leaders. Let's link it with Satanism, and let's link our religious leaders to our business leaders and political leaders, and see that they're all one big club. So let's look at some photographs and take a peek at some videos some other people have made, because when we find out that basically the LDS leaders are functioning in concert with leaders of other areas of society, both in the United States and out of the United States, and that you see them connected with the Luciferian religion of Freemasonry and openly showing satanic allegiance, you have to ask yourself some very important questions if you're LDS. And if you're not, or if you've come out of the church, if you've realized something was wrong, but you thought you escaped, maybe you need to think again, because like I said, every area of our lives is attended to with similar programming techniques as you had in the church. And that's why you've learned to reject people and messages that are not mainstream. Here we go. Why, that looks like a token I've seen in the temple, but those people aren't in temple clothes. No? Is the queen in temple clothes? Oh my. What is she doing and why? You've seen that in the temple. Now, of course, in the temple, you only get grips that were used in the lower 3 degrees of Freemasonry, in the blue degrees. So not all the Masonic grips that you see being used in public are actually going to be ones that you recognize from the LDS temple. But some of them are, aren't they? And so we've got religious leaders and political leaders in front of Masonic symbols that you recognize probably if you're LDS. And there we got Obama and one after another, we see these grips being exchanged that you recognize from these leaders, these power brokers, the Queen, who is much more powerful than any U.S. president ever thought of being. We see celebrities using Illuminati symbolism. And we're going to hear some interesting things from Beyonce, because she's going to tell us where her power source is. So we're going to connect the invisible world with the visible world, with the Illuminati, with Freemasonry, which leads all the religions and everything on Earth. What are these students doing here, huh? They're throwing Illuminati signs, they're throwing Satanism. Yeah, and this is a commercial. So what company is having them do that sort of a thing? Because they're throwing these signs and symbols out into the open now, more openly than ever, to kind of popularize these things. Here we got the little girl covering her eye. Okay, so we'll see a little bit more about that sort of a thing, and run some clips that some other people have done. Okay, I got it all backwards as far as when I'm recording and not recording. Shown this before, we got Anton LaVey, head of the Church of Satan, and Obama doing the same thing. You know, throwing the horns. You know that woman. So, why are these folks like all in the same club here? What's the association? Well, it's called the Luciferian religion. Some people call it the Luciferian agenda, from which, you know, the Illuminati is basically spawned. Freemasonry, black magic. And what about Christianity, which is controlled by Freemasons? I mean, you can see tons of celebrities popularizing use of Masonic and Illuminati symbolism and other occult stuff. Showing their Freemasonic rings. Here, this guy got the fleur-de-lis. I mean, here we go, the Beatles. Lennon's throwing the Satan horns. McCartney's throwing the 666 LCNI. Obama showing his allegiance there. The ever-popular Gordon B. Hinckley, Dick Cheney shake, which I used on my other phone so much. Oh, come on, there we go. Yeah. Nice. Gordy and mass murderer Dick Cheney. And then, of course, Tommy Monson and George Bush. I mean, how many times I got to show this stuff? Alright? This isn't just a men's club for drinking. These are world rulers. Alright? These are movers and shakers in all sorts of industry. And churches are just a major part of the control mechanism used. I mean, that's why you got guys like Tucker Carlson saying, oh, you're a conspiracy nut. I'm not a conspiracy nut. No, we're mainstream. We're mainstream. Hey, you know, they talk trash about CNN, but they're, you know, Rupert Murdoch's at Bilderberger. Oh, okay, so we're supposed to trust him? Right. What is this club these guys are all in? Why do we have the mixture of Freemasonry, Satanism, Luciferian religion, and Mormonism, and other religions, other religious leaders that we see time after time, whether they're Catholics or whether you're looking at, you know, Billy Graham, Robert Schuller, Oral Roberts, Pat Robertson, Ken Copeland, Benny Hinn, all these other scumbags that teach a religion to the people that they have nothing to do with. They don't believe that kind of stuff, of course. You know, in case you weren't aware of it, this picture, here you got, this is when Gordon B. Hinckley is giving like an honorary doctorate from Brigham Young University to Dick Cheney, the Satanist. And why was he doing that? Well, because Gordon was promoting, you know, mass murder in the Middle East for Dick and GW, who were bombing the crud out of Baghdad about that time, not to mention what happened in Afghanistan. But the wholesale bombing of Iraq, and then when Gordon pretended that the Gadianton robbers, you know, that were basically the same as the people in Baghdad. The people of Baghdad were equal to the Gadianton robbers, and the Americans were equal to the Nephites. So what we should do is just go, you know, wipe them out, because that's what our brave and wise leaders wanted us to do in that War and Peace speech he gave, which I took apart in some of those videos on corporate governance and the Illuminati. So, Gordon B. Hinckley was using advanced sales techniques. He used hypnotic language. He uses, 180 turnarounds, and feel, felt, found, and some NLP, and he sounded really convincing until you really examine the facts and realize that everything he said was, completely backwards. And he said that Jesus Christ was with us. He said that the young man who, whose mother sent a copy of his letter to Gordon B. Hinckley, said that he felt, safer and better knowing that our Heavenly Father is with us here, representing our way of life in Iraq, representing our way of life in Afghanistan, in the Middle East, by, killing thousands and thousands of people to advance American interests or international interests, make a hell of a lot of money for the military-industrial complex, which, Dick Cheney was pretty heavily invested in, especially since he was in a very related field there with Halliburton as CEO, and had a lot of stock invested in a company that has profited a great deal from the everlasting wars in the Middle East. So these guys are cross-invested in their corporations. All sorts of these corporations are, which we looked at in, the excerpts from the Corporation Nation video on corporate governance. So guys like Dick Cheney are wise. According to Gordon B. Hinckley, we shouldn't question them. We should just do, they've got more information than we've got, and we're just like those Nephites. But, when you look at the Book of Mormon, the Book of Mormon says they had righteous leaders, especially in times of war, for their leaders and generals and so forth. And Gideon said not to go after the Gadianton robbers in their own lands, when the people thought that was a great idea in the Book of Mormon story. And as a matter of fact, it said that the Lord would deliver the Nephites into the hands of the Gadiantons if they dared to go after them in their own lands. Yeah, you might want to reread that one. Gordon also said that the Lord rules in the armies of the nations. So the Lord's been ruling in the armies of the nations that have been killing people for 17 years over there in the Middle East now. Well, it's been a lot longer than 17 years, but since this so-called war on terrorism has been going on. So why do these guys function together? Why was Gordy putting on the sales pitch for Dick and smoothing things out when there'd been, protests against him? Dick and George, and the war, and, why did Gordy shut down Stephen Jones at BYU, who was showing that it's basically physically impossible for 3 buildings to go down from those 2 planes when they all went down demolition style. And of course, Building 7, the Lehman Brothers building, was never even hit. But it just, felt sympathetic, so it went down the same way the others did. The way buildings always come down when demolition charges are set in. So the religious leaders are very valuable to the other corporations that profit by war, for instance. And that's one of the reasons they preach this loyalty and patriotism. They receive, tax-free status for running businesses that support the government, which they do with their religious conditioning and mind controlling of the people. And so here you see these 2 guys in a Masonic grip in a PR show that Gordon B. Hinckley did for Dick Cheney and George Bush at Brigham Young University to kind of bring the LDS young people and so forth around to to follow the prophet and follow the leaders of the so-called country, the company that we call the United States. They got a pretty cozy little arrangement there, and they've obviously got a special brotherhood because of the grip that those 2 fellows are sharing, just like we saw with Bush and Monson. So, if this doesn't, help you put the dots together, that there's something going on with these guys, then I'm not quite sure what it would take, because it's pretty obvious what we've done here is we've linked secret societies, including Illuminism, Freemasonry, and Luciferianism, which is behind them, and all the churches together. And the actions of leaders like Gordon B. Hinckley and other Christians who act as Amalekites upon the towers to promote these wars and to promote following authority. Now we can look at various venues, including the entertainment, and they'll all promote the myth of the Abrahamic religions. Even if it's Ozzy Osbourne, you will still hear things about God and the devil, and you will hear that in all sorts of venues, because they have to say certain things to get the benefits that they need to be blessed with success, and they have to cooperate with the theme, and the theme includes, Christianity or other Abrahamic religions and a devil. I want to take a little look at this video done on American Satan. And, this guy is going to have the point of view, he's going to promote the point of view, as is the movie, that there is like the Hebraic God and, the Satan. And that these folks are selling their souls to the devil. Well, it's pretty obvious that these folks who gain success are definitely in the occult. And, you know, and then there's copycats, like, you know, a guy I knew, his son tried to get their band to be successful by sacrificing this girl. They were LDS, and they sacrificed her. He thought he'd go direct, you know, with Satan, and it didn't work out. Their band was not successful, and they were busted. But you got to go through the channels, and the channels include the Illuminati. So let's see what this guy's got to say, because it's kind of interesting anyway, and you're seeing it in, you know, Hollywood format, pushing some of these views.
So I recently watched this movie called American Satan. This film was made by Sumerian Films, which is also Sumerian Records, a record label with many artists under its belt. Anyway, this movie was about a young rock band called the Relentless that drop out of college to move to the Sunset Strip to chase their dreams.
Hang on, let's just make sure we give some credit where credit's due here to this person. So, yeah, what is, ODD Reality, is that that's the channel here, okay. Alrighty, just want to make sure we give credit here.
These kids live out of their van while hunting down live venues to perform their songs and make themselves known. Struggling from day to day, they keep running into an enigmatic old man that says strange things. First, when they arrive in California,
John 7:24. Stop judging by mere appearances, and instead, judge correctly. Can I show you boys around town?
then they run into him again a little while later.
Do you know how long I've been stuck here, in this vessel? Wait. Again, Mama, shall we? Anyway, let's go on inside and have that drink.
They go inside to sit down and have drinks and talk business.
This is my favorite table. Done a lot of business at this booth.
Oh, come on, guys. Don't actually believe this for bullshit, do you?
Yeah, I mean, why us? Because I believe in you. I know you came out here because you know what you're capable of. So do I.
Pop stars, they're the ones who influence the masses. We're just a rock band.
Pop stars are so boring. Anyway, I've got most of them.
Thank you.
JC, Empire State of Mind. I love that lyric. Jesus can't save you. Life starts when the judge ends. And then his little protege, Kanye. You know, I put him on the front of Rolling Stone magazine with a crown of thorns on his head. Total fucking bastard.
Okay, right, look. Why exactly a band like us?
Rock and roll. Heavy metal. You know, you guys, you're so loyal to me. You wear me on your sleeve.
Mental.
Have you ever seen Iron Maiden? They fill stadiums full of their fans, singing along to songs like The Number of the Beast. Or what about Van Halen? Running with the Devil. The Stones. Sympathy for the Devil. I'm not saying I'm Satan. Just saying the devil is a catchy lyric.
That was all real. They would never put it out in the open.
Check this out. See this? The pyramid in the eye. Do you know what that signifies?
Illuminati.
What's that writing say?
Favors our undertakings.
Yes, I do. And this?
The Order of the Ages.
Novus Ordo. Yeah. Now the best place to keep a secret is right in front of someone.
All right. Fine. I'm a believer.
Are you speaking for everybody? All right, I'll take one. We perform a ritual ceremony. And then I will make you international icons.
What's the ritual?
Something very simple. Human sacrifice.
Oh, come on.
No way.
Needless to say, they agree to the ritual sacrifice, and boom! They blow up and become the most popular band overnight with their debut album, American Satan. American Satan is AS. AS is 119, right? Backwards, it's 911. This album also reminds me of Marilyn Manson's album, Antichrist Superstar. So American Satan, Antichrist Superstar, both very similar. Both AS 911. And let me say this, maybe these numerical outcomes or similar name patterns weren't devised by man sitting around in a room going, let's put this in there, let's make sure this is that. You know, but rather the Matrix is speaking to us, and at times through us, you know. Reality itself, whatever it is heavily coded with hidden knowledge and messages when you're able to read between the lines. So anyway, the lead singer of The Relentless is cleverly named Johnny Faust, as in Dr. Johann Georg Faust, a German astronomer, alchemist, and magician from the mid-1400s. Just decades after his death, he became the subject of a folk legend where a man makes a pact with the devil in exchange for worldly pleasures and unlimited knowledge. This legend has had many adaptations over the centuries, leading all the way up to today. There is a 1994 Faust movie by Jan Svankmajer. On the cover for the movie, the Faust character is using his hand to cover up one of his eyes. Very interesting, right? Being that we constantly see this among famous people, Hollywood icons. Pop music stars. The fashion industry. Movie posters. Movie covers. Album covers. Magazine covers. Music videos. Products they sell at the grocery store. Ads for department stores. They even have the Einstein brothers doing it with bagels. And the list goes on and on. I could easily make a 5-hour video with how much of this stuff you can find. I'll admit it sounds funny, and it seems completely ridiculous and unreal, but it's exactly like the man said on American Satan. The best place to keep a secret is right in front of someone. So we have the 1994 Faust cover with the guy covering one eye, and the story is about selling your soul. Let's listen to some words straight from the celebrities themselves.
I sold my soul to the devil.
I am misunderstood a lot at times. My music, my image, people have their whole thing about me, whether it be me being a devil worshiper or whatever. It's them reading into my hand over my eye on my album cover.
Why is your hand over your eye?
Because I'm a devil worshiper. What are you talking about?
I swear I wanted to be like the Amy Grant of music. Yeah. But it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
Well, it goes back to the destiny thing. I made a bargain with it, a long time ago, and I'm holding up my end
What was your bargain?
to get where I am now.
Should I ask who you made the bargain with?
with the chief commander
On this earth?
and this earth and in the world we can't see.
I mean, I can try, but then it just doesn't happen. I can sing notes and sing strong and do all these things that when I'm just by myself, I can't do. And I remember right before I performed, I raised my hands up, and it was kind of the first time I felt something else come into me.
If your ultimate goal is to be famous, then you're gonna do a lot to get there, like sign your name in blood in a contract with the devil.
Yeah, and it really upset me, so I summoned Satan, and I write about how I made it.
Where do you summon Satan?
It's in the chapter called Eat, Pray, Love, Conjure Satan. And when I was 12 years old, I signed a deal with Satan in my room, and I was to...
CBS doesn't condone this.
Wait a minute. Because I wanted to get famous no matter what.
Well, there's a rich history of the devil in rock and roll. So way back to Elvis was everyone said he's playing the devil's music.
For whatever size, them reading into my hand over my eye on my album cover.
Why is your hand over your eye?
Because I'm a devil worshiper. What are you talking about?
I swear I wanted to be like the Amy Grant of music.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil. I swear I wanted to be like the Amy Grant of music.
Yeah.
But it didn't work out, and so I sold my soul to the devil.
Why do you still do it? Why are you still out here?
This earth and in the world we can't see.
I mean, I can try, but then it just doesn't happen. I can sing notes and sing strong and do all these things that when I'm just by myself, I can't do. And I remember right before I performed, I raised my hands up, and it was kind of the first time I felt something else come into me.
So, she raised her hands up, like in the drawing down of the moon, and she noticed something enter into her. Now, of course, there's a lot of ex-Mormons that have decided to worship science. Of course, science was once one with magic, if we read from the sorcerers that were, our great thinkers and scientists, whose sorcery has been written out of the history books, whether you're talking about Isaac Newton or Leonardo da Vinci or others. You'll find, look at how much Newton wrote about alchemy and magic. He wrote about banking, he wrote about all sorts of things. And it wasn't just the portion that we call science, it was what Albert Pike calls, the all-encompassing science of all truth, basically, which is magic. And in Mormonism, we hear that all truth is circumscribed into one great whole at the lecture at the Veil. But Albert Pike basically said that all these truths were, the science of understanding all these things was the science of magic. And so through the Disney Company, we've been programmed to see things much differently. And so here we've got Beyonce saying that she's empowered basically through the invisible world. And those who have come out of Mormonism who didn't have spiritual experiences or have decided that they were emotionally or psychologically induced and haven't seen the unseen world have effects on the physical world, then maybe it's difficult for people in that position to understand the invisible world. But for those who have experienced it, like Beyonce is talking about, and basically all the people that are, involved in the occult, who sell themselves, basically creating these contracts, as this fellow is telling us here. In other words, they're hired. The success that these bands have is given to them. I mean, these people may work hard, but you don't make it to the top apart from Illuminism, apart from Luciferianism, apart from the powers of the unseen world. When I talk about spiritual experiences that I've had, actually I talked to a guy today, I just wound up in this conversation, and his brother was, doing some things that he thought was, his own power through paranormal, but I've had experiences like that, except for I realized it wasn't my power. It was far beyond anything that I could possibly be doing by mental concentration. Beyonce is discussing, she doesn't allude to what she was doing when she raised her hands. Was she, she was probably raising both hands up above her head, kind of looking like a Y, the letter Y, and perhaps she was using particular hand signals, summoning. And you can read about various people who have done that, and I've done that. As a youth, just somehow, just spontaneously decided to copy something I saw on an album cover. And what happened was incredible. And the power that coursed through me was indescribable. And, things started happening in the physical world around me that were beyond explanation. And like I said, there are a lot of us that have experienced these things. And whether you're doing healings, remote viewing, astral projection, channeling. Heck, my mom told me, I've seen things happen with various people, and I've had things happen with me where the physical world was affected, or when people said things that were not their own words, which has happened to me. And my mom was playing the organ for the church, and there was a problem between one song and the next or something. There's some delay, and then suddenly she was playing something she'd never heard of, and she was looking for the music, and she looked down and her hands were playing this stuff that she'd never heard of, and complicated pieces. And she's not super talented, she just practices a lot, and she was like, on remote control. And of course that's just the Holy Spirit, right? Of course that's what she thought. But this fellow I was talking to today, had the spiritual world lead him into another church, was it the Apostolic Church? Similar as I had the spiritual experiences lead me into reading the Bible, which I had basically ditched at that point as a child, and then some pretty gnarly experiences with missionaries and things that went on to where we joined the LDS Church that I've described in other videos. And this guy was talking about how he wasn't feeling too religious, and then he started talking to this priest, and this guy says, "Let's start praying." And next thing you knew, he said something entered into his body, and he was speaking in tongues. Stuff he didn't know what the heck he was saying. My stepmom does that stuff, and she thinks it's really cool, and she's a born-again Christian. She was showing my daughter this, and she's like goes into a trance. You're channeling. It doesn't matter if you're using a Ouija board, or you're in a Christian church, or you're or you're on stage, or you're playing the organ at the LDS Church. Something can enter into you, and you're doing things and saying things that you've never heard of, speaking languages you don't know. In the LDS Church in the early days, they were speaking in tongues, and that's one of the articles of faith. And now they just they play it off as, it's when missionaries learn a language fast. Seriously? Well, people do this in these other religions, and they were doing that kind of stuff when Joseph Smith was going to the camp meetings in 1823 when he was getting introduced to religion. No, not 1820, thank you. And they were speaking in tongues, dancing endlessly, chanting, doing all kinds of this weird stuff that Christians do. Some Christians do, and you know, things got pretty wild at some of those camp meetings from what I've read. And these kind of things happen. So we've seen that Christianity is you know, these big name guys are Freemasons, they're occultists. When you learn about the Luciferian religion, which is taught in the higher degrees of Freemasonry, you realize there's no way these people believe this stuff that they pawn off on the masses. All these Freemasons run these different religions. And they just, you know, put a little different twist for the JWs or the Mormons or the Scientologists or, you know, SDA or whatever it is, or the evangelical Christians, and they just laugh all the way to the bank. You know, look at the houses some of these guys that live in, you know, Benny Hinn's house in Pebble Beach. God, yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. They're laughing at the people. But, how, you know, is everything they do a trick? What about the people that fall down? I mean, my brother went to something like that. My dad's been to stuff like that. And I'll tell you what, my stepmom tried some stuff saying, you know, devil be gone. And my knees went out. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? You know, I've definitely witnessed some pretty intense situations with non-physical entities, and I know plenty of people that have, and I've been with people when multiples of us were very aware of a presence, ones that were pretty scary. And one time, as a missionary, basically I summoned a presence by speaking words that were given to me. I was told to say a certain thing at a time that seemed kind of weird. I blew it off. I was given the same command through the spiritual world. I did it, and what happened was blew everybody away. And the family joined the church. I mean, you know, when this presence entered the room, it lit up the room like entering the celestial world or the terrestrial world from the telestial in the temple. I mean, boom, there was a presence. It was unbelievable. It was beyond description. And you know, the father in the family just started looking up and looking all around and had his palms of his hands up. And, you know, I've mentioned this one time before at least. And he asked me, and he said, what is going on here? What is this? And I said, of course, that's what the Holy Spirit testifying to the truth of our message. Because that's what I was, you know, feeling like I should say. And it was extremely strong, the feelings that were there and the energy that entered the room in every particle of space. It was phenomenal. And everyone was blown away, and they joined the church. And, you know, I mean, it was like, yeah, well, super intense. More intense than temple dedication that I've been at, where all kinds of people were seeing, you know, loved ones and stuff that had departed, etc. It's the same intensity of another situation I had when I was praying, and something like that occurred, except for it was accompanied by some physical world stuff that was, you know, kind of super undeniable, and was in the same place that I'd had the scary stuff happen, you know, with the lamp swinging and all that kind of stuff when I raised my hand like Beyonce talked about. So, as a misguided teenager listening to that devil music that I listen to now, but I see things a lot differently, and I use music that hardens my heart against the feelings that make my heart bleed every day. So, the music industry is filled with Satanism. It's filled with the occult. It's filled with layered messages. And we're trained in the church, or we're trained in the media to don't look at the man behind the curtain. He's not there. Don't look. Don't look. Because if you look, you know, they tell you, oh, you're crazy if you look. But if you look, and you look carefully, you'll see that there's a whole other invisible world out there. And there are things hiding in plain sight. And if you do your investigating, as I've done for 40 years, you find out that these people are linked together. Everybody that's a power broker is linked through the occult. And Mormonism is just a small part of it. It's a small part of it. And religion is a part of it. But they're all run by occultists. And we can see the links between them by the way they salute each other in a lot of those pictures that I just showed. Start reading Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, you'll realize that things are much different than you've been told regarding Freemasonry. That's why the church doesn't want us to look at Freemasonry. They'll do anything. They'll you know, they'll take the hit for racism and blame it on Brigham Young when it's in the LDS scriptures. They certainly couldn't afford to have white and black Freemasons mixing. So the Book of Abraham was written right when Joseph Smith became a Freemason and introduced Freemasonry into the new endowment. And I was talking with somebody about that today because, you know, give me a break. He could have done that in 2 days if his seer stone was working right, if he really got the Book of Mormon out of his brown rock. I'm not saying somebody can't channel and use a rock. You can channel, you don't need a rock to channel. It's just that, you know, there's way too much plagiarism in the Book of Mormon to buy that. Joseph Smith writes about, you know, Illuminism and Freemasonry in the Book of Mormon, or whoever supplied that material, whether they were Rosicrucian monks or somebody else that Joseph Smith knew, because obviously he was writing about Freemasonry long before he became a Freemason, was as he wrote it into the Book of Mormon and into Moses chapter 5. So the larger religion is the religion of mainstream. That's what I'm trying to say here. And the Freemasons don't want us to see them. They don't want us to notice who they are and what they are, as far as the level of correlated control that they exercise in the church. Sure as heck doesn't want you to look there. So they'll use all sorts of decoys to keep you away from the truth, that basically they are, the church is run by Freemasonry and always has been run by occultists and Freemasons. And as soon as they brought it into the church, they had to segregate, which is why we got the priesthood ban, in my opinion, because, as we know, Prince Hall doesn't mix with Scottish Rite or York Rite. Any of the whites and blacks just, didn't mix. There may be a little mixing now, but look at the photographs, look up Prince Hall, they'll all be black guys. You look up Scottish Rite, York Rite, you're going to be looking at white guys. And I actually think I have seen, a couple of pictures where there was somebody that wasn't of the same color in the same picture, but it wasn't in a Prince Hall picture, and it sure as heck wasn't happening in Joseph Smith's time. That's why he was doing things to protect his life, like making master masons out of all these guys before they received the temple endowment. So he wasn't breaking his Masonic oaths, at least with the boys. Christians call this the Luciferian religion or the Luciferian agenda sometimes. Some Christians do. Some Christians like to believe that, they're exempt from the control of this, if they realize that, guys like Robert Schuller, Oral Roberts, Billy Graham, and all these Christian leaders are like that, or that the Jesuits and the Pope are all, locked in on the dark side. But the entire Christian scenario that's painted for us, whether it be through rock and roll bands saying that, you follow the devil, God's going to hate you, and that sort of a thing, they're all pushing the same Christian belief system. And the Freemasons give us the education in science and religion. They give it to us from both sides and control both sides of us and manipulate people into the directions that they want society to travel. Like I said, that's why we see the same messages shown as the new norm in all sorts of commercials about all sorts of different products, but they're all pushing the same things as politically correct, the same things that you'd find being pushed at the Lucifer Trust, now called the Lucis Trust. And they're on Wall Street, not to mention running the UN meditation room. So how's that work for you? The LDS leaders and Beyonce following the same Luciferians. Is that possible? Maybe you ought to just look at some more of the photographs and watch the cooperation that the LDS leaders give to the leaders of the body politic, who are invested in the defense industry, as it is called, the military-industrial complex, which sacrifices plenty of people. Sacrifice can be done on a large scale. What about on a small scale in that movie? Human sacrifice. Does that really happen? Does it happen in LDS temples or underneath them, in Masonic temples, and all sorts of buildings? Underneath, down low, below, as that same religious cult has been doing for thousands and thousands of years? Or are these just radical right-wing extremist stories again, right? The more we look into these things, the more we'll find evidence that these things have been occurring for a long, long time. Why did the Illuminati, create the French Revolution? Who created the American Revolution? Are there Freemasons and Illuminists there as well? Why do we have guys like Benjamin Franklin and the Hellfire Club and Ordo Templi Orientis and, the Grand French Lodge and all these things? What about all the horrible, lascivious things Ben Franklin was, involved with the Hellfire Club? How satanic are these, lascivious acts that they're performing below these buildings in London and Paris and Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia and whatnot? Why do we have these occultists as American founders? Why? Because America is the new Atlantis. That's why. Has anyone ever wondered why the goals of the Illuminati in the Book of Mormon were reversed from those in, reality? Isn't that kind of odd that whether you think Joseph Smith authored it or someone else, he's got the secret combination, and what are they doing? What is their goal? Their goal is to set up the rule of kings. The rule of kings. And the righteous people are supposed to be promoting, basically a democratic republic. Isn't that interesting? And it's filled with manifest destiny doctrine, and it's filled with false history as well. So, if we look at the claims of the goals, published by the Illuminati early on, what was it they said that their goal was? What were their goals? Well, pretty similar to mine. They were to bring down the church and bring down the monarchy they obviously brought down the French monarchy. And they wanted to install a system of government which was more stable in its ability to be controlled by secret societies, which is what we've got now. So, if we had Illuminists, causing the French and American revolutions, and eventually installing governments that we see modeled here in the New Atlantis of America, according to Manly P. Hall, 33rd degree Freemason, occultist, cult lecturer, like all these high-level, 33rd degree guys, you'll find them in the Golden Dawn and all that sort of a thing, the guys that are authors of Masonic books and lecturers. And you will find that these things were done for a reason. And in the Book of Mormon, it's touted as being like the model for, other nations. The ensign of the nations, really, is the type of thing that we hear. And in the Doctrine and Covenants, we have Joseph Smith telling us that, the God of Israel raised up wise men and so forth to create the Constitution. But when we really learn about the corporate nature of these countries, which are just companies, and basically sub-franchises of larger companies called countries or and such, they all function through the divine right of kings as far as authority goes and sovereignty. They all function as corporate entities, and they all are actually actively involved in commerce. Everything is commerce, and you wind up being actually property of the companies. We're treated like cattle for a reason, because we are cattle so far as these nations are concerned. These bodies politic, which are privately owned companies in disguise as public governments, and as these people that are supposed to be civil servants and servants of the people are actually employees of the body corporate. They're company employees, and they don't represent us, they represent the corporations. The corporations called cities, counties, states, and pension funds and countries, whom through cross-investment of stock wind up forming a much more easily controlled governing body for those who are in power and who formed or backed certain societies such as the Illuminati, which in and of itself is just a tool of some very, very wealthy occult families from Europe. Like the conversation that I had with that fellow today, we find that the unseen world does intervene and actually causes people to be led into various religious cults, such as Mormonism, Catholicism, that guy's experience with the Apostolic Church, I think it was. So many different churches with different doctrines are backed by these spiritual forces that do give people experiences that are beyond emotional or psychologically induced in many cases, just like people receive in the occult when they're practicing, all sorts of things, channeling and sacrifice of animals and of people. Yeah, locking you in is important. My ex-father-in-law, a Freemason of what rank I don't know, but obviously at least a Master Mason, as evidenced by the fact that his daughter was the queen of the Job's daughters, and all of her friends were, and many people, a few people I know have seen, in his secret office that he always kept locked in the house upstairs, but sometimes accidentally left unlocked or left the keys where some curious person could get a hold of them. He has a picture in there with him holding a guy's head. I mean, someone that's decapitated. And it's like it's a trophy for him. It's like it's proof that he indeed was found worthy as a warrior to reach whatever degree seemed to require that, is what seems to be implied. And, the warrior on the block will know that he has mastered his craft when he harnesses the seething energies of Lucifer, as we are told. Yeah, love those Freemasons. I lived with Freemasons, and it's pretty screwed up people. Definitely some very screwed up people. Some of the most evil people